Okay, great. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to Mysterium 2008. I'm Tobin Bergenhill. You may know me better as Robert the Rebuilder. And I'm here to give a short tutorial on how to create your own age for Uru, be it the Complete Chronicles flavor or the ABM plus TPOS add-in. So, before I begin, I want to know what kind of level to pitch this at. So, how many folks here have never ever used any kind of 3D modeling software before? Okay. Now, how many folks here have actually made an age that they put into Uru? Okay. And it probably goes without saying, but how many folks here have actually, used pen and ink to write in a descriptive book to make an age? Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, what I'll do is it's going to be a very low technology demo. Minimal of tweedling polygons and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. All right. So, what I'm going to do is just show you the tools that you can use, which are all freely available. And we've got links to them on the Guild of Writers website. Also on the website we have tutorials which explain exactly what I'm going to do. And so just go to guildofwriters.com. That'll set you straight. So the main tool that we use is Blender. Now this is a freely available open source 3D modeler that it's like all the other ones that it's very tough to learn. A lot of 3D modeling software is very tough to learn just because you're dealing with the 3 dimensions and how do you exactly draw in that form. So it takes a little bit of learning, but it's well worth it. It's also extensible. In fact, that's why we chose it, because you can write software and add it to it. Of course, you can guess that Blender out of the box doesn't just create ages or Uru. So what the fan community had done over 3 years now is write these extensions in a language called Python that can read and write the data files that Uru uses to load up. And it's been a long process to deduce the basic things, how to get something that looks like a cube, and then to add things to it, color, textures, can you run into it, all that sort of stuff. And within the past 6 months, they made amazing progress with the different features that they can do. But I'm not going to go into those here. I'm just going to get the very basics. What does it take, at a minimum, to get an age that you can walk around in and not fall? So here's what you see with Blender. It's got this multi-area display, and borders you can adjust to your liking. And each area can be changed to one of many other kinds. And so this gives you the ability to customize your environment however you like it.
At this point during the demonstration, the camera stopped recording. It took us a couple minutes to realize this before starting up the camera again. During this time, I started up a free terrain generation tool called Bryce. To create a terrain, click on the mountain icon at the top. This generates a mountainous terrain, which is represented here as a red wireframe mesh. Now, we'll resume with the demonstration.
Yeah, again, you can find the URLs down at the Guild of Writers website. Or you can just search for Blender, blender.org, basically. All right. So is it running now?
Yeah, hold on a second here.
Okay.
Bryce is also available with links on the Guild of Writers?
Yep.
I need a
That's on there too.
Alright. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. So to get a better glimpse of what this thing looks like, you can hit this button, which is called Render. What that'll do is it'll slowly fill in higher and higher resolutions of this. Right now our mountains look like just a big pile of wet clay. So that's because we haven't given any kind of color or definition. So what we'll do instead is we'll jump to first the editing tool, which you can see by the little D button over here. What that does is give you what's called a height map version of this. What that means is that the lighter the color, the more towards white, the higher the altitude is, as you can see in this little 3D preview window over there. And you can affect it by using some of these tools. You can see the circle that I've got there. What that'll do is, within that circle, when I click the mouse button, it'll raise that portion of it higher to white. Now, when I let go, all of a sudden you'll see this big protruding mesa there that I made. This is important to have a nice landing area when you link in. You don't want to link in on the side of the mountain. Now, what we can also do is use the host of different quick tools they have over here to make this place a little bit more interesting. And so one is the Mounds tool. So what this will do is just make these random foothills appear. There we go. And another thing you can do to make your world a little smoother is you can actually apply erosion. And what I'm doing is I'm just holding the button down and sliding it to the right to sort of control more or less erosion. There we go. So now we have a very textured kind of world. All right. Now that I'm happy with the layout of this, I'm going to hit the check mark on the bottom and go back to our red view. We still don't have colors associated with this, so that's the next step. Is I'm going to add a material by clicking the M button. And what this gives you is a material lab, as they call it. The primary thing you'll use is this little arrow next to this blank sphere that represents our terrain in all of its naked glory. We're going to choose from a whole host of different kinds of color schemes for terrains. And so here we have, it's kind of hard to see them listed, but I'm going to choose one called Rocky. So yeah, you've got all sorts of types of rocky, including volcanic. The one I'm going to choose for today is something called Canyonlands, which has a nice sunset colors for it. And all right, so I've got that selected, and I go back. And now when I hit the render button, there we go. It's something akin to what you might see in New Mexico. You wouldn't be able to automatically generate textures, which Bryce does for you.
Can you create your own shaders, textures, and stuff for it?
Let's see. Right now, we haven't deciphered how to use shaders, but textures, yeah, by all means. So you could actually apply multiple levels. You could even have shaders with stencils, so that it can have, say, grass on one part and ground on the other. Again, I won't go into any of those techniques, but they're all available on the website.
What is the scale that an avatar would be in?
That's a good question. What I'll do is I'll delay answering it until I import the terrain in there, and then I can show you just how big, or in this case, how little it will actually be. All right, so I'm happy with the way that this is. I'm going to go back to the editing, and what I want to do is put this in a form that Blender can ingest. So hidden in this little menu up here above the height map is something called Export. And so what this will do is it'll give me the option to choose what format I want. The one that we've had the most success with is something called Wavefronts OBJ. It's a very old descriptive format that's actually in plain text. You can open it up and actually see the vertices if you were crazy enough. And check for yourself that everything is there. So I'm going to call this planes.
So that's what people are referring to when they talk about an object file?
Let's see.
Or is that different? This is probably a little overly complex for this presentation.
Well, I guess in the context of 3D modeling, yeah, that'll be an object file.
Okay.
Right. So let me, okay, so here we're on the verge of writing this thing out. I just want to tweak a few things. You can dial up the number of, well, I hate to say polygons, or in other words, how many pieces this terrain is made out of. The higher the better, but the problem with this free version is if you go too high, it locks up. So you have to write a fine line.
If you go too high,
if you go above 10,000, it doesn't like it. That's free, so I guess what can you ask for? Besides, once you're in Blender, you can then make it finer resolution if you want to. So this is just to get it started. There's also a host of different textures that it creates. The only one we really care about is the ambient color, so I'm turning off the other ones. Now, this is going to be one texture for the whole thing. So, in other words, it's going to take one image and kind of stretch that all over the whole terrain. So, ideally, we want to crank this up really high, but just for this demo, you know, so we're not waiting here until sunrise, I'm just going to make it a rough 1,000 by 1,000. You can also set the file format of this texture that it's going to generate. I just choose JPEG, and I choose high quality. All right, and then I'm going to get it to just start going. Now, this isn't terribly exciting to watch, so I'm going to temporarily switch over to Blender while it's thinking about and writing out those files. All right, so now we're back in the main application we're going to use to write our age. So the first thing you need to do is create a new book. And the way you do that is hidden over here in the scripts panel. That gives you this menu of things you can do. And what we want to do is we want to add, and then there's a submenu called PYPRP. That's what the developers have called this plugin. It's a Python PRP plugin. PRP is the file extension. If you've ever dared peek into your Guru data files, that's the extension of the ages for each page. All right, so we're going to go in there and we're going to say create a new book. And here we go. It's taken quite a while, so it must be very impressive. Well, actually, the only thing that actually is created is what's called a text object. And that's just nothing than like a text editor that appears over here. But this is what a blank book looks like. It's a bunch of boring lines with parameters for how long the day is and how many pages it has. But there's one important thing in here that we need to change in order to keep this age playing nicely with others. Each age is given a unique number called a sequence prefix. I don't know why. But anyway, we got to make sure that we have our own unique sequence prefix. What I've done before coming here is I've obtained one through another website that the Guild of Writers points to. It's this tool called the Uru Library Manager, or ULM for short. Some of you may have heard this. What this tool does is it actually puts books on your Relto shelf for your new ages. And it has a nice interface for it, so you can download ages that people have put online and just drag them over onto pages of the books for them on the bottom shelf. You could also do this for ages that you created locally and do the same thing. On the website, you can also get yourself assigned a unique number. And I've reproduced it here. It's kind of hard to see, but this is the gist of it. When you go to the ULM site, you go to your profile. Down at the bottom is where you can actually request new sequence prefixes for your ages. And again, this is so that you don't have one that trods on another one. If you do that, then as soon as you go to your age, Uru just crashes. So you don't want to do that. So just make sure you got a unique age number. In this case, this one is 10121. So all I'm going to do is just type that up in here. 101.
Where's here?
Oh, what I've done is I've clicked over on the area, the text area for my book. And there's an entry there called sequence prefix that's defaulting to 100. Consequently, there's lots of people out there with ages that have a sequence prefix of 100 if they haven't changed it. So I'll go ahead and change that. One other thing that I created with that magical create book was another text file that controls aspects about the environment. The important one is what color the sky is when it draws. And so what I want to do is make it a cyan one. Now, I wish I could just type in components of it. Yeah, that's something to be improved on in the next version. All right, well, I'm going to save what I have so far. So I'm going to call this world Mysterium Age. All right. Now, another thing we need to have in this world is, of course, a place to link into. So I'm going to go back to where that scripts panel was, and this time say add, TYPRP, and create a new spawn point. It should actually say linking point, because that's what we're all familiar with, but I guess the Cyan developers actually call it a spawn point. That's just a common terminology with games. Now again, you're kind of wondering, well, where the heck is it? What's happened to it? Well, what Blender gives you is this ability to put your things into different layers, so that way it won't get so cluttered. And what I'm going to do is enable that layer that I put it on, layer 2. Alright, so there's this nondescript point where I'm going to appear. Alright, so far I've got a book, I've got a linking point. If I exported the age right now and linked into it, I would just appear in this cyan-colored void and plummet down. So why don't we go ahead and put in the terrain. Okay. And so to do that, I'm going to import a wavefront object file. And I'm going to navigate over to where I put that. And this is so thrilling. Okay. And this is, of course, assuming Bryce has done its job, and it has. Okay, great. So I won't bother Bryce at the moment. And there we have it. There is the planes object I made. So I'm going to say import. And I'm not going to change any of these options that it shows. I'm just going to say OK. And here it is. There's my terrain. Now, there's a few things we've got to do with it. It's back to being this ugly clay. So let's go ahead and change its appearance. First of all, let's see, I'm going to select it, and selecting is actually done with the right mouse in Blender. It's just one of those weird things you have to get used to doing. Once I've done that, it's showing the attributes of this object. What I'm doing is on one of these panels down here, and it's so hard to see the fields, don't worry about it. I'm actually going to give it a name, something meaningful. I'll just call it terrain.
That's unique.
Right.
Descriptive.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm going to go jumping back to what is called the materials panel. The material, again, is sort of what controls the color of it. And so by default, Blender has all your materials being nice and shiny as if they were wet. To eliminate the shininess, you set this particular color, which is called the specularity. Now, without going into the details, that's sort of what gives it that glint. If it's black, there is no glint. And unfortunately, it isn't as easy as just setting that to black. There's also this secret slider over here. Again, all this stuff is in the tutorial, so you don't have to just sort of watch it and forget it, and then when you're really ready to do it, just sort of follow the steps. All right, now that I've done that, let's see. I am going to need to give it the texture that it generated. So what I did was I clicked onto this little tiger patch over here, which symbolizes the texture, and I'm telling it to add a new one. And I wanted to set the type of texture. Now, you had mentioned earlier that, about the ability to do shaders and computationally done textures. While Blender has all that in there, the plugin only handles images. So that's the type that we're going to do today. It's just like image. And for this, I'm going to browse to where I saved that. And it's right down here. There it is. There's my JPEG. Okay, so you can kind of see this very colorful patch in the corner there. I've got that image in memory now. There's a few other buttons I'm going to click, and I'll briefly describe why. There's one that's called min-max, and what min-max is a way to have progressively smaller versions of your texture. It's a performance thing. So that if you're far away from an object, it's not going to use this massive texture to draw it. It's going to use a little tiny one. Well, this is the ground, and we're going to be on it all the time. I haven't put in any kind of flying ability. So in order to make this a lot smaller, I'm just going to turn that off. I'm also going to turn off compression, because when you compress, you lose a little bit of data. I want it to look as good as possible. All right. Now I've got that, but it still looks the same dull gray. So what I need to do is I'm going to actually change the visible mode here. There's different ways you could draw in Blender. Depending on your computer, maybe having everything all correctly lit and colored brings it to a slowdown. So they give you an ability to progressively degrade what you're seeing. Right now we're seeing it with none of the lighting and none of the texture. I'm going to turn all that on, and we're just going to get feature this white blob. But it won't be featured for long. What I did was I then switched into a mode where I can actually see each of the individual triangles in here. Oh boy. The reason I did that is so that I could actually tell the triangles what image to use. Over on this other panel, I changed it over to what's called the UV image editor. It should have been called the texture editor, but go figure. What I'm going to do is tell it to choose the one and only texture I've got in there, and now I've got these guys colored accordingly. All right, so let me go back into the normal, what's called the object mode, and tilt this viewpoint up a little bit. And there I have my terrain. All right, well I'm going to save, as Blender is pretty temperamental. All right, so now you're pushing about scale. In Blender, one of these units, which you may or may not be able to see, is equal to a foot in Uru. So this
You mean
terrain
those
is actually 8 by
those
8
grid
feet.
things, right?
The gray grid?
You're talking about the gray grid.
Yeah, what you probably see are a larger grid, okay? It sort of goes in scales of 10, all right? So this larger grid, the darker lines are 10, every 10 meters. So what do? We have to actually go and resize this guy. What I'm going to do is switch to a top-down viewpoint. And what that is a way to go square down on top of the terrain. All right, and from here, I am going to go back into edit mode because it likes it better if I scale it that way. I've got everything selected, which I've done with the A key. That's why they're bright orange. And to scale, I just hit the S key. Now, how big should I make it? Well, it's 8 feet, and I probably want it to be like 800 or maybe even 1,600 feet big. So I'm going to multiply it by 200, and I'll type in 200. All right, where did it go? Well, we made it so big that it's actually kind of intersecting our little camera, if you will. One way to prevent that is we could actually make our camera a little bit bigger. This world that we're viewing has limits to it. So let me just crank that up a bit, and we'll no longer have this cutaway view. Okay. Another one of these joys of using a 3D monitor. All right, so we have terrain, but if we went onto it right now, we would fall right through it. All right, so what do we got to do? We got to actually add in collision to it. Collision, you may recall the big discussions that occurred when we went from the prologue version of gurus who missed online, they switched versions of the physics engine, blah, blah, blah. Well, what a physics engine is kind of like the visual engine. Where the visual engine controls all of the geometry that you see, the physics engine controls the geometry that you run into. So there's different ways you can actually have the geometry that you run into. You got this big complicated tree, you can get away with just a cylinder. A lot less polygons for it to compute. But the terrain, you kind of want you to be walking on the same polygons that you're seeing. Alright, so having said all that, the way to enable that is simply by pushing this button called bounds. And now I've got my choice of how exactly do I want this collision version of the terrain to be. Well, I'm going to choose one called static triangle mesh, which means for every triangle that you see, it's going to do a collision run. Alright, now when I warp in, I will actually step on something. But the problem is that I will be completely in the dark. So this view shows you what it looks like when you have your lights in here. I don't have any lights in here at the moment. Yeah, you have a blue sky with a silhouette on a silhouette. So what we're going to do is add some lights in here. And oh, another important thing I did. Do you remember that that little point I made where we link in? Well, right now it's actually underneath the terrain. So rather than appear down there, we're actually going to grapple the terrain and scooch it down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, remember that flat area I made kind of like right here at the top? That's where I'm going to move the terrain so it's right underneath that. Arrows you see, they can actually be used to grab and move the geometry, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to grab the blue one and scooch this down so that at least it's at the same level as the linkage point. And then I'm going to scooch the red one and scooch it over so it's directly underneath that. Now, given that this is 3D, this could probably be lined up correctly this view, but I go to the side and it's probably way over here. So I'm just going to rotate the viewpoint real quick. Alright, the lava's pretty close, so I'm going to go and use this new green arrow to get right on it. Okay, so when we link in, we won't be under the terrain. We still have the problem of it being dark. Alright, well, we'll create a couple of lights. And the reason you create two lights is you want one coming from a simulated sun coming from above, which is nice. But you also want light coming from the ground, from below. The reason that is because, of course, the light reflects off the ground and gives you the super illumination. If I only added one light from the top, it kind of looks like I'm standing in a big dark room being lit by a spotlight. So it's just a little extra level of realism you can do. So the way that you add 3D objects in here, and I kind of did that, glossed over with the Lincoln point. You may see this little bullseye cursor there. That's the cursor, I guess for lack of a better word, where you insert things, such as objects or lights. So I'm going to insert a lamp there. And there's various types of lamps you can do. They all control which direction the light goes, or there's a spotlight, or there's a light coming from all directions. It's kind of like a lamp. I'm going to choose the sun type, which actually has a direction. And the direction is very hard to see until I make it a lot larger to see. So let's see. Alright. And, okay, so we have this line kind of showing the direction that the sun's going. So it's kind of shooting due east as if it were a sunset. And you can see the effects on the terrain. It's kind of nice, but I'd rather have one at about maybe 4 in the afternoon. So, to do that, I am going to rotate this view. And you notice how I have those nice arrows for controlling where I move it. I can also change it so I've got this nice wheel to rotate. So to do that, let's see, I grab one of these lines, and it's kind of dynamically rotating as we see it. Okay. What that did was actually rotate it in a different direction. There we go. Okay. There's that, and then I'll just do the other thing. There we go. You could also type it in, which is what I kind of like to do. So now the light is going in this direction. No matter where I place it, it's going in that direction. And I just need the light going in the opposite direction. So again, I'll use my magic 3D cursor there. I'll say add sun. And this one, in order to make that line visible, change the length of it a bit more. And a skeleton view of the terrain. I promise this is the last thing I'm going to do, and then we're going to jump into the water. Alright. There we go. I've got them pointing in opposite directions. One kind of coming from the sun down, and the other one coming from the ground up. This one I don't want to be as powerful as the sun, so I'm going to make it about half as powerful. Oh, come on in. Oh, hi. And I'm also going to make it kind of orange right. There we go. So I have this great orange glow coming from the orange ground. Alright, now before I export, I just want to check that I've got everything. I've got the Lincoln point, I've got the unique sequence prefix so it doesn't crash with other edges. I have the terrain, and it's solid, and it's textured, and I also have 2 lights. Oh, the picture. Remember when I took your picture? I'm going to actually introduce a very simplistic imager into this world. It's nothing more than the big floating rectangle with a picture on it. So, let me put that pretty near our linking point so we don't have to go hunting for it.
This age is
I know we all
no
like
fun.
to puzzle, but,
Yeah,
you
wasn't
know,
it supposed to be the puzzle?
for the interest of time, I'm just going to keep it like that. Now, I also make sure it's not burrowed in the ground, so let me zoom up on it. Okay, so I actually, not here, but back at home, created a little imager. And I'm going to go into that file where it's at, and get it, here's the imager. And I just choose the object name from this unfriendly imager, and load it. Alright, and so there, if I zoom up close enough, you can actually see where you guys are in the world. And it's right where the linking point is. Let me move it over a little bit. Okay. Now I've got everything. Alright, so I'm going to save. And now I can export. What I'm going to do is export to the TRP format, which is Uber. And there's many different ways you can choose. We're just going to use the main to generate the whole age. And now the place where you put this is actually into your program files where you have the Uru installed. One thing that should be clear is before you do any kind of this experimentation, it's always good to have a backup copy. Things can go wrong, and they have. So rather than having to spend all that awful time reinstalling, it's good to just have this directory which you just put right back in place. Okay, so here I am with all the other ages that you're familiar with, and I'm just going to tell it to export. Now, what it's doing is it's going through and taking all these images and packing them in the right format and that kind of thing. And if there are any problems, it'll appear here and tell you what. An FAQ for all the types of errors that have been found so far and what that actually means in human language. It's a good idea to check that.
What? Oh, no, what that means.
Okay, well, let me get out of Bryce because it's
PC
no
load
longer
letter.
useful to us. Now, Bryce has this curious ability to hide its menu. All you have to do is just poke your mouse to the top, and then the menu will appear. Okay. Don't save it. That's okay. I'm not going to attach that anymore. All right. Now, we've got the age in there among all the other ages, but we have no book on our shelves. Well, that's where we're going to use the Uru Library Manager that I mentioned earlier. And again, this tool is one of the ones you can download from the Guild by your site. That's okay. It's complaining that it can't find the website that it goes to because, of course, I'm not hooked up to the internet. You don't have to be. It's just kind of nice in order to see a list of all the ages that you can download that people put up there. There's 2 tabs. One is the list of ages that are out there that you can download and put into your books, and I do recommend that you experiment with that. Another one is called the Personal Ages tab. Those are ages where you kind of, like I just did in the back door, put them in the directory. So it discovered them, and here's ours. Now, I just have to look for a blank book. There's a lot of them that I have in my library here, and I'll bring it over there. You can also double it up with another book. It's just I kind of like to have one book per age, so that's up to you. And that's it. It's already written that book into the age, so that now, when I start it up, there'll be a book there. So, let me start up Uru, and go through the profile and all that. Quickly go through those 2 movies. Another thing that's important is whenever you're experimenting with this, you just don't know what's going to happen when you go into the actual game. You might get as far as getting up to the point where you're touching your hand on the book and then hell breaks loose. Wear some kind of protection. Luckily I brought mine. You can get this by just mugging any construction worker. Alright. And again, what this will do is it just adds books onto their shelf on the bottom. That's all controlled again by Python, which ULM is actually able to go in and change and secretly add in books according to what you downloaded. And after this, after I show the world, I'll then turn it over to you all to come on up and explore some of these other ages that we have here, just sort of a free open, and I'll also open up for questions too. All right, so here's the exciting moment where hopefully we get into our Relto and nothing bad happens. Okay, so there is my guy. Now, I'm ashamed that I didn't have a Mysterium shirt. Now I'm going to go and head on over.
Yay, shimmy.
Oh, hey, come on in.
Here.
All right, so when I go into my bookshelf, I should see a whole bookshelf. And I put a little advertisement on there showing our support of the upcoming war campaign. All right. And so it's the last book on the shelf. Okay. Now, we haven't figured out how to get a nice image of the world showing up in here. All we have is this very threatening looking black boy. And so we're just going to try it and cross our fingers. See if anything happens. All right. We made it. There we are. We have our glow from above. We have our cyan world. If I go over a little bit more, we'll see these other mountains. Some are dark, some are light. If I turn around the right way, there is our little fake miniature. Okay.
Cool.
Awesome.
Actually, it's happened correctly every time I practiced it, but you just never know if it's going to all go together or not. All right, folks. That's all I had for the presentation. So at this point, I could take questions. You all are also welcome to come up one at a time and kind of explore around here, take a look at some of the other ages we